Hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. And that is the tagline that I say every week on this podcast. And all games are creative to some degree. They all have visuals, they all have sound. This week's game fits the bill better than most. It's a very Gaming in the Wild game. It's a pixel art adventure of a non-traditional type, with a dash of sci-fi, a dash of contemporary dystopia, a heavy dash of politics, some great writing and music, some of which we're listening to right now. It's been quite well received. It's currently only on PC and Mac, and it's called Norco. So I'm very happy to be talking about Norco today. It's a very exciting game, and it's one that I think that listeners of this show might click with particularly well. I really enjoyed playing this one, but I have been playing a bunch of other stuff too. Here today in Reykjavik, it's actually a bright, hot, sunny day with a clear blue sky. You'll be amazed to hear. And so I think I'm actually going to head outside for a bit and not spend my whole day playing games, but I have had time to play some good stuff this week. I've been continuing with Nier Replicant, the original game in the Nier series. It's 11 years old at this point, but it did get a remaster last year. However, you can still feel the age of the game. The gameplay has been polished up, as have the visuals and music, so it feels a lot like Nier Automata, but some of that gameplay is just pretty old in design. The quest design is pretty old. You spend a lot of time running from A to B and back again. So I'm trundling through it. I'm enjoying the experience, but after 9 hours in so far, I'm getting a little sick of fetch quests, I'll be honest, but I am going to finish it because I really want the story payoff. I've also been continuing to play Bayonetta, the original Bayonetta on Switch, as I'm on this Platinum Games moment. And I was tweeting about Platinum Games actually, and someone recommended to me Metal Gear Rising. This is a strange entry in the Metal Gear series. It was meant as a game to come out between Metal Gear Solid 3 and 4, but Kojima never finished it, and so he ended up handing it off to Platinum Games. So it's an action game with Platinum Games gameplay. It came out in the Xbox 360 era, but in the Metal Gear universe. And so I picked it up on Xbox. Xbox having such excellent backwards compatibility as it does. The game is still available in the Xbox store. So I picked that one up, and I've been playing a little bit of that as well. And it is ridiculous spectacle gameplay with high intensity, high tempo action, much like all the other Platinum games. And so I've been having a fun time playing that one. There's something about Platinum Games gameplay design that seems to age better than a lot of stuff. It's very much based on flow, and it's very much based on speed and agility and snappy inputs. And that stuff ages well. Like, it doesn't feel incredibly old. It looks, you can see the age on the game. But in terms of the gameplay design particularly, I think Platinum Games age better than most. So I've been having a fun time playing a little bit of Metal Gear Rising as well. I also dipped into Loot River this week. That's a new game that's come out on Game Pass. It's a pixel art roguelike dungeon crawler, top-down, something that we've seen a lot of in recent times. But this one has an innovation to it. As you are using the left stick to navigate the world, you walk onto these large tiles, large floor tiles, in Tetronimo shapes. And you can move those with the right stick. So they're quite big. They're like, it's like the floor of a house kind of size. And you step onto one using the left stick. There's probably some baddies on there that you have to fight. So you fight them using the left stick and the shoulder buttons. And then using the right stick, you can actually move the floor that you're on around in the world. So it's this strange mixture of top-down dungeon crawler with like a dash of Tetris-y gameplay as well, a puzzle element you could say. And I played this one for an hour and a half or so. I noticed right away that the parry doesn't feel good and that the dash didn't feel good. And as I was playing it, I was having a certain amount of fun, quite a good little game, but the combat just doesn't feel right. And in games like Hyper Light Drifter and Hades, that are kind of the kings of the top-down genre of this type, with a really snappy combat where you really feel in control all the time. To have a game where you have like a bit of a rough parry, where your character seems to almost stumble backwards, and a dash that doesn't seem to kick in quite snappily enough or go quite far enough. It's, there's so many of these games around now that I don't think I want to give the time that it takes to really get your teeth into a roguelike game, unless it's the very top of the pile. There are some really, really good games in this genre. There's stiff competition in the top-down dungeon crawler roguelike genre, and Loot River for me was missing just a little bit of polish on the gameplay to make me feel good about playing it and to make me want to invest that time in repeating the cycle, powering up my combat, learning the movesets of different enemies, all of the things that you have to do in a roguelike. So I bounced on Loot River. It doesn't seem like I'm alone there. That seems to be a common sentiment with that game. I think a lot of people tried it. A lot of people bounced. So yeah, Loot River. It's out there on Game Pass if you do want to give it a spin, so you can play it without having to buy it if you're a Game Pass subscriber. I also actually spontaneously started a new playthrough of Control, a game that I've really never shut up about on this podcast since it first began. It was the game that I reviewed on episode 2 of this podcast over 2 years ago now. But I bought the Ultimate Edition under the foolish impression that would mean I could migrate my save over and then play the DLC, the 2 content DLCs that Control got on the PS5. It turns out that you cannot migrate your save file from the original Control to the Ultimate Edition. And so if you want to play your save file on PS5, having paid for the upgrade, you can't do it. You just have to play the whole game again, which is something that just seems inconceivable, that you would release an update to a game that's an award-winning game that's been out for a couple of years and not let people migrate their save file. I wonder how many people bought the Ultimate Edition of Control hoping to play some late-game content and DLC and then realized they had to start from scratch. That said, that irritation having been mentioned, I do love Control, and so I actually spontaneously fired it up on Twitch. I got a 3D Pulse headset for my PS5. It's a Bluetooth headset with a mic built in. That makes it very, very easy to stream. I don't have to set up a mic. I don't have to get myself into a good position with the camera, the mic, the headset, and everything. You can just throw in a headset and you're good to go. And so I spontaneously streamed a little bit of it. If you are interested in seeing my very, very occasional streams, I am Gaming in the Wild on Twitch. You can also watch that one back if you want some burbling speech in the background while you're doing something around the house or whatever it is you do when you're watching streamers. I guess it's a second screen for most people when you're watching a streamer. So I played a bit more Control. I started from the beginning pretty much. And it was really fun, actually. I came up against Tomasi, the first boss in the game. And when I first played Control, I found it to be very difficult. It's over 2 years ago now. And this time I got Tomasi on the first go and very quickly. And that felt great. That felt really nice to remember how tricky I found it at the time and to go back and be able to polish off that boss quite quickly now. So it was really fun to go back to Control. I also played a little bit of Quantum Break recently. I've seen a little bit of hype coming for Alan Wake 2, and so I'm just revisiting a little bit of Remedy Games stuff to get in the mood for it, because it seems like it might be coming this year. And it was fun to go back and visit Control. It's a really good game, but it was a bit of a kick in the teeth to have to start from scratch with no skills, no power-ups, no save file. I was missing some of the powers that you have as Jesse Faden. For example, being able to levitate. And I kept trying to levitate and almost killing myself because I'm just so used to being able to levitate now, having finished the game quite some time ago. But that was fun. That was a fun thing to do. But before I move on to talk about the featured game of the episode, Norco, let me briefly mention that this show is patron supported. If you enjoy this podcast, if you listen every week, or if it's your first week this week and you like what you hear, you can support this show for $1 a month. It lets me know that people out there are enjoying the podcast. It's maybe the most important thing, much more so than the dollar itself. But I really do appreciate the show of support. So if you are a fan of the podcast, if you're a regular listener, if you would like to support this show, you can do so at patreon.com/gaminginthewild. In return, you will get occasional extra episodes. You'll get an invitation to our Discord, and sale recommendations and occasional other posts and content of different types. So that's patreon.com/gaminginthewild if you'd like to come and join the club. A big thank you to all my existing patrons, and thank you to you if that's something that you think you might do. I also very much appreciate anyone that leaves a star rating on Spotify and a review on Apple Podcasts. That helps people find the show. So thanks very much to people that have been leaving reviews and star ratings. I appreciate you. And with all of that said, let's move on and talk about the featured game of this episode, Norco. So Norco is a 2022 game developed by Geography of Robots. As far as I understand, it's the first game released by the studio under that name, at least. It's published by Raw Fury, who continue to have a really hot streak for spotting great indie games. It's out on Mac or PC only at the moment. I played it on a Mac, an M1 Apple laptop via Steam, and I think this was a great place to play it. It's a game that is suited to a mouse or a touchpad. I would say probably much more so than a console controller or a gamepad. Metacritic has it at 88 currently from 17 reviews. That includes 2 10 out of 10s, and it got a 7 out of 10 from Edge magazine. I'm pretty certain that it will be an indie wildcard come Games of the Year time. It's been mentioned that way. There's a certain type of gamer who I think is just really going to warm to this game. People that like Kentucky Route Zero, people that like Disco Elysium, people that don't mind a wordy game, that like a narrative-driven game that really has a point of view and has something to say. So there is definitely an audience for this, and the game has been mentioned in the company of some pretty major games. It only has a 7 out of 10 from players on Metacritic, but it doesn't have that many reviews as yet. So whilst there has been a bit of buzz around this game, it certainly hasn't set the world alight. It seems like a small-scale indie breakthrough game, if you know what I mean. But some folks that reviewed it, some players that reviewed it, were disappointed by a lack of gameplay and found it a bit text-heavy and slow. But I think that that's the nature of this type of game, really. It's the wrong game to come to if you're looking for some snappy gameplay. It's not what you're going to find here. You're going to find an experience. You're going to find a story. How Long to Beat has it at 5.5 hours for the story, 9 hours for completionists. Steam tells me that I've been playing it for 10 hours so far, but I don't really trust that Steam clock. I think I did play it for about 9 hours, though. The devs describe it as a Tribeca Award-winning narrative adventure about living and dying in Louisiana. It's a poem, prayer, and love letter to drainage ditches. And make of that what you will, but after you've played the game, you will have certainly experienced probably more of drainage ditches of Louisiana than you have so far in your life, unless you happen to work in them or something. And I describe it as a whip-smart, pitch-dark, point-and-click with a thick, swampy atmosphere, poetic writing, and an engrossing story that takes a sharp look at some of the casualties of late capitalist industrial America. And you play as Kay in this game. You don't really see Kay. I'll explain the visual style of the game. But Kay is a teen or a 20-something who has been born and raised in the Norco area, has left home, and has hit the open road. The game starts with Kay leaving everything behind, and you're just reading text and seeing beautiful pixel art screens that are animated with a very little amount of camera work on them. So they are animated screens that look at landscapes, But we're not talking picturesque landscapes here. We're talking rail yards. We're talking ruins. And it tells like a short version of Kay's travels after she leaves Norco behind and heads out into a near-future America that seems to be undergoing some pretty serious problems. There is some dialogue in there that explains how America is. And the writing right off the bat is pretty mesmerizing, actually. So I'm going to read out a couple of little quotes here just from the intro. So this is just to give you a flavor of the kind of writing that you're going to get in this game. After you leave Norco, it says, "By and by, you made your way east. You threw your phone into the Rio Grande. You joined the armies of the Mesa. For months you were in the company of fugitives. You slept in nuclear tunnels, repairing engines and weaponry. The war was a meme that set Albuquerque on fire." And this is delivered a little bit like in Disco Elysium. Old-fashioned RPGs used to have a large text bar at the bottom that was very wide. And Disco Elysium did the really cool thing of presenting text more like a newspaper column. So you're only getting 5 or 6 words per line. So it's a vertical slice of the screen. And it allows you to read a lot of text much more quickly. It's more like reading tweets than reading in the old style of RPG and in that horizontal text box, which is really helpful. It helps you to absorb a lot of text more easily. It's there's a reason that newspapers do that. A narrow column with rapidly scanning your eye just lets you absorb it more comfortably. So that's a really nice little addition from Disco Elysium. But the game continues to describe what Kay is doing since she ran away. She left her brother Blake behind, and sometimes he gets in touch and he tells her that her mum isn't doing well, that she's getting sick, that she's acting erratic. And eventually her mum dies, and she has to go back, basically. And the text reads, "You called home from a landline in a motel somewhere beyond Texas. You knew from Blake's voice that your mother was dead. You hung up, shouldered your bag, returned to the highway. 5 years had passed, and the ghosts were calling you home." And the writing has this lovely quality to it. It's just good writing throughout this whole game. The storytelling is great. It really gives you a sense of momentum, of movement, of travel. And back home in the Norco area, it gives you a sense of what this place is, of who the people that live there are. The writing isn't just expositional or story, it's also great dialogue. There's just a constant flow of good writing in this game, and it really stands head and shoulders above most of the games in that respect. It's also aided by the great visuals and music. I love the music in this game. It's soft electronica mostly. There's a few parts where there is some metal or some more propulsive music, but for the most part you're listening to this very warm sound bath of quite gorgeous music. And I think that if you take together this wistful, melancholic, evocative writing, this very warm music that just allows you it makes the game feel like a nice place to spend some time. And then this very detailed, very well done pixel art that shows you, great images of the places that you are. It adds up to a really nice mixture, and I really enjoyed spending time in Norco. And after that intro, Kay arrives back home, the game begins proper, and you start in Kay's childhood bedroom, and you're looking at a pixel art screen of that bedroom. You never see Kay, it's not like that. The game doesn't have character movement, so you're just looking at the screens that you're in, you flick between screens. And again, the room has some lovely detail in it. You can see a teddy bear, you can see photos, you can see books, and you can click on things to examine them. You'll get information about them in that text window, and you get to explore the house, the childhood house that Kay has been running from, and that's just such a great intro for the game, this wild freedom that she's been going through, and then landing back in the place that she was running from. It feels like a very effective beginning, and it hooked me right away. As you're looking around the house, you get a picture of what family life might have been like. You see things that used to belong to Kay's mom who's passed away. There is no sign of Blake, so there's a bit of a mystery there. There are questions about her mother's death that are outstanding, and Blake is nowhere to be found. And so the game starts to frame itself as a little bit of a mystery. You've arrived back in your hometown of Norco. Something's going on. Something was going on before your mum passed away. You get comments from people. You start to put together a picture of stuff that was going on. And it's a mystery. It's a personal story about Kay. But it also feels a little bit to me like dark tourism, if you've heard of that, where people will go and visit sites of strife or sites of tragedy or trauma just to see them. And it feels a little bit like, as we're moving through this game, that we are engaged in a little bit of dark tourism. It's a trip through a very troubled, atmospheric disaster zone of the US, basically, where industry has crushed both landscape and community, and the communities that are trying to hang on in this very strange, industrialized, rural area of Norco, and the people that are falling between the cracks, and what it's like to live somewhere like that. It's just very fascinating. It's a fascinating story premise, and it's a fascinating place to set a game, and I was pretty much in already at this point. And the game is a near-future sci-fi. There is a robot in the backyard of the house that you will talk to and who will become a companion, who will join your party in this game. When people join your party, you will see a portrait of them at the top left hand of the screen. There is a little portrait of Kay there, but it's just a drawn face. And other people will join and leave the party throughout the game, so you'll have company at some parts of this game. And it has quite a neat UI generally. It is a pixel art point-and-click game, but not in the traditional sense, not in that Secret of Monkey Island sense, where you click to move your character and you see them walk across the screen. You get static screens, basically, that are a picture of where you are. You can click on those screens. You can click on objects that you would like to look at. You can click on people that you would like to talk to, and you'll get dialogue choices. You can click on books, and you can get a little bit of text to read, a little bit of context. So each place is a pixel art scene, and they are very nice to look at. Some of them have animation. You can see the clouds moving, you can see birds or rain, you can see water moving, and they're very nicely rendered and a really good palette, quite crunchy, pleasing pixel art. And you flick between screens, basically. There is a little map at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, a mini-map that has dots on it, and it just shows you how many places you can move from where you are. So like in a text adventure, if it says there's like a cliff to your west, but there's a path to the south, a path to the north, and a bridge to the east. It's a little bit like that in the movement through the game, really. You can see that you can move north or east. And so you can maybe go from like the kitchen out to the porch. On the porch, you might see a rocking chair that you can click on and sit on it or get a memory from it. You'll see statues that you can click on and look at. And from there, you can see that there's a couple more dots that will let you go to the driveway, where there's a car that needs to be repaired, perhaps, or out to the street, where maybe there's someone you can talk to. And each time you move from the kitchen to the porch to the driveway to the street, the backdrop will change. So you'll get a picture of that location, pretty much static, little bit of animation, a couple of items or people to click on. And there's no movement control, so you're just clicking between screens. And as such, it's a very old-fashioned feeling game in some ways. It feels like it's from an age before we expected to see animated characters, like it's an old-fashioned game design. It suits the game really nicely, and it gives it this between times kind of feel that sort of suits the whole thing, really. It is a text-heavy game, but the writing is excellent, so you're always happy to be reading in this game, at least I was. It's thematically a little reminiscent of Kentucky Route Zero. It's a little bit about downtrodden America. It's a little bit about capitalist wreckage and what happens to the community in places that have been hollowed out and cast aside. It's very much the theme of Kentucky Route Zero, although it strikes quite a different tone. In Kentucky Route Zero, everyone is an artist, or they all have they're all trying to stage a play, or they're playing board games, or building a communal housing. It's just but they're lost. They have no money. They have no jobs. They're kind of cut loose from the system and from the world, and they're living in a shadow, and they're a little forgotten about. But they're thriving in their own way in Kentucky Route Zero. It's an odd game. Here, it's less of a. I mean, nothing about Kentucky Route Zero is in any way idyllic, but it's straight up dystopian in this game. People are really being crushed by industry. Towns are being flattened, land's being bought up. The paths of rivers are changing because of industrial waterways, those ditches that we heard about earlier. And what's really interesting about this is that it turns out that Norco is a real place, that the New Orleans refining company has taken over such a big amount of Louisiana that the whole area is so dominated by refineries and industrial works that the whole area is just called Norco now, which is just so striking, that an area of land where people live, where communities have been for centuries and longer, is just completely taken over and renamed. Like, the ownership by the company is not just about land deeds, it's complete. It drips through the culture, and it affects everyone that lives there. So it was very striking to me to find out that that's a real place. It's called the Cancer Corridor because there is so much pollution coming out of the Norco refinery that it's going into the water, it's going into everything. And people get sick there. It's like a real-life Erin Brockovich type of situation. And in the game, we see a huge industrial complex belching out smoke with chimneys that intermittently flare with fire. And it's huge. It's like a city on the horizon with blinking lights. And it's rendered in pixels in the game, but if you Google the Norco refinery, you can see that it's pretty much a one-for-one picture of that place. It's presented in the game as this Blade Runner cityscape with jets of fire going into the sky. Turns out it's pretty much really like that over there. I'll put a link to a video that I found in the description of the podcast in the show notes. You can click on it and see this place in action. It's kind of chilling. It's a piece of land, a place that's been altered beyond recognition, and that's where the game happens. And because of that, the game acts as, it's not just Kay's story, it's also a commentary on that part of the US, and the developers are from there, so it's very much based on their lived experience. It's also a piece of surrealist science fiction. There are robots, there is some strange technology run amok. It's also a little bit of like dystopian science fiction, like society has crumbled further than it has now in this game. As we heard in the intro, there are wars raging out in the US. There are fields of fire, like things have gone really dark. And you encounter some of that in this game. There is like a club that you end up in, a little bit reminiscent of the church in Disco Elysium. You'll find yourself going to an empty mall where a cult has taken over an abandoned mall, and you have to talk your way in there. It's part of the story. And you'll find yourself exploring the swamps around the Norco refinery. So it ties together this dystopian vision of the US, this strand of reality that's just quite disturbingly woven in, neatly woven in, and then this surreal science fiction, and all of this wrapped in a very striking parcel of pixel art, point and click, really nice point and click gameplay, really nice writing, and super soft music that serenades you as you play the game. I think it's worth talking a little more about the gameplay and the UI and what you're actually doing in this game as you're playing it moment to moment. So as well as those screens that I've described where you're talking to people, picking up objects, having people join and leave your group, moving from scene to scene, there are some puzzles. You do have to collect an item here and stick it into a keyhole there, there's like put the X in the Y type puzzles. You collect objects that you'll need later. So there's a little bit of basic old-style point-and-click puzzling. You do sometimes need to search the screen a little bit with the mouse pointer, which I guess is pejoratively known as pixel hunting from the old point-and-click days. There is a little bit of that. Most of the time your eye is guided pretty well between things of note, but there are a few instances where I got a little bit annoyed that I had missed something that I didn't find visually distinct, and it held me up, basically. The worst offender was some hanging wires in a pivotal scene in the game. Just hanging down the middle of the screen as you're looking out across the refinery. I thought they were just background. I ignored them. I was walking around in circles for quite a while. Turns out you have to click on the wires, and that's just essential for progression. Didn't read to me as important. So it does rely on visual cues and doesn't always bullseye it. I guess there are also some mini-games in this one. There is a little bit of combat, hilariously, where you'll have the people in your gang versus, let's say, security guards or, assailants of some kind. And it's combat in that you'll see the people you're fighting against. They have an energy bar. You pick which character you want to attack with. They've each got a very simple attack. For example, some symbols might flash up on the screen. If you click on them in the right sequence, then you will land a hit. Another character has these targets that appear on the screen, and you have to click them at just the right time in order to shoot. So there's combat in the game. There is also a mini game in which you get a voice recorder at some point, which is quite useful. So if you're going around talking to people, you can select text from things they've said and click the record button. There's never any voice acting in this game, but it does mean that you'll have a record of what they said, which you can then play to someone else in order to try and elicit more information or a reaction from them. So there's this cool recording mini game. There is also a part where you go into City Hall, and it changes into a top-down map of the City Hall, and you have to click around this almost like a simple-looking blueprint. So you get a different view when you're in the City Hall, and there's a little puzzle in there, a riddle that you have to use the numbers of the floors to solve. And eventually, if you've played Kentucky Route Zero, you'll know that when you're actually driving in that game, you just see a little icon of your truck that you move around. And there is one section of the game that's a little bit like that, but it's late game, so I won't spoil that any further. And none of these mini-games are exactly super mega fun or delightful in and of themselves, or, exciting gameplay that I would highly recommend. But they all, good enough to just keep you busy and to keep you ticking happily through the story of the game. And the story is really where it's at in this game. So there are mini games, there is combat, there's the voice recorder, there are logic puzzles, there are riddles. The riddles can be a little bit rough, actually. They're straight up riddles, so someone will give you a puzzle, and you have to decode the puzzle in order to, for example, come up with the number for a security keypad. And depending on how good you are at riddles, you might find this delightful. I am not great at them. A couple of them I just got immediately. A couple of them just did not click with the way I think, and I had to look them up. So there are roadblocks that are just straight up old-fashioned riddles rather than gameplay puzzles or mechanical puzzles. It's quite interesting, It's like a textual riddle. It's very, very old-fashioned. The kind of riddle that you might ask someone around a campfire or something, that becomes a part of the gameplay here. There is also a mobile phone, like a cell phone, that you get in the game. You can use that to use apps. These are quite ingeniously designed. It's like the main UI of the game. I guess a lot of games use a pause screen menu. In this game, it is your cell phone. You can use an app, which is a taxi app. And when you call a taxi, you see an overworld map, and you can move between different scenes. For example, a swampside town, or the gates of the refinery, or an antique bookstore, or a village that has been depopulated apart from one person. You can click on those and move between them. As you meet more people throughout the game, they will tell you about places and tell you about people. And new dots will appear on your map. So there's always somewhere new to go, and you can generally tell where you're supposed to be. There's a little bit of backtracking, but not too much. And the range of places is really nice. There's a bustling market that you can go to where someone's trying to sell hot dogs, and there's a bunch of kids hanging around, and it looks really bustly and fun, and you're trying to meet someone there. There is an abandoned warehouse that you can go to. There is a park that you can go to where no one is there. There is a swamp side I guess, what used to be a town, and now there's just a store and a bar that like 3 people are in. You can talk to those people when the bar finally opens up. And so you're moving around some quite interesting places. There's like an antique bookshop that you go to and you know someone there. And I'm not going to give away story spoilers for this game, honestly. I think the story itself is something that's best experienced rather than told. But all of the locations have a nice, granular, crunchy look to them, and they all have a lovely text description that comes with them. You get a sense of place playing this game. I think that's perhaps what I liked most about Norco. The quality of the writing is such that as this strange, surreal story is unfurling before you in an increasingly surreal way as you're trying to get to the bottom of the mystery of what happened to your mother and where your brother is, and what the hell is going on in Norco. There's just some such strange subcultural stuff going on, like David Lynchian Blue Velvet, like beneath the surface. It just gets weirder and weirder. But as you're doing all of that stuff, you just get such a strong sense of place here. You get a strong sense of this community, these people that have dropped out and what they've been through and how eccentric they have become, how many different interests are at play here, and the type of place that you are, like flooded riverbanks, walking along the flooded riverbank. You'll just get such a lovely description of how this place used to be and how it is now. Like a fisherman that is fishing for fish that are long gone. There's a camera crew that you encounter at one point that's filming something a little bit like, I think it's a little bit of a comment on True Detective, like the media sweeping in and Ozark maybe, and kind of making, TV out of this poverty-stricken, kind of disaster-struck communities. It's a very interesting mixture of evocative, interesting places that you get a good sense of, and the overall picture that starts to come into focus about what's going on. But rather than being heavy-handed political commentary, there's a heavy dash of magic realism here too. The sci-fi stuff doesn't pull its punches. There is a strange super being that is around. There is, this mole cult. And by the time the story comes to its denouement, you really do feel like you've been on a crazy trip. And I really enjoyed the whole journey of Norco. I finished it in a couple of sittings over a few days. And I have such a strong sense of it. It's one of those games where you think back to your time playing through it, and it really takes you back to a mood, to a place, to a sound, the look and the writing. And that's the thing that I really like about Disco Elysium, is that you're really taken back to that broken down, the broken tiles of Revachol, and the people that you meet there, the strange scenes that you encounter. There is a dash of that in this game. It's not quite as refined and sophisticated and large in scope as Disco Elysium, but it has some of the same flavor. And the same goes for Kentucky Route Zero. It's a game that takes you on a really magical ride that just has a lot to say, and a lot of material information flows past you on your journey through this story. And it's only afterwards that you realize just how rich and beautiful it was. And I think that Norco, whilst it might be the junior partner amongst those games, it does deserve to be mentioned in the same breath. And I do think that people that have played those two absolutely classic games will get something out of Norco. I think that this is a really good game. Incredibly glad to have played it. And I feel sure that it will be on my Games of the Year list come the end of the year. It's a really intelligent game with a lot to say. That's Norco. So that was Norco. I hope you enjoyed hearing about it. I had a really great time with this game. I opened up my Games of the Year list. So far I only had on it Elden Ring and Forbidden West. I've since added a few more to it. Norco is a game that I feel sure will end up in my best 10 this year. I would say if you're interested in this game, I would say just play it on your laptop, honestly. I'm not sure how well when this game does come to consoles. It's Raw Fury, and Raw Fury do a pretty good job at porting things, especially successful games that have taken off. I would expect to see Norco on consoles. It is on Game Pass for PC, if you happen to have that service up and running. If not, I say just get it on Steam, play it on your Mac laptop, just using the touchpad. It's a game that really does well with a mouse, basically. And it's a game that has pixel art. It doesn't necessarily look good blown up on a big screen. Not sure it's going to adapt incredibly well to controller, especially not if they try to use a reticle that you control using a stick. That never works. I say play this one on a laptop. Just get it on Steam or use it on Game Pass for PC. What a great game that is. I'm really happy to have played that one. It was the kind of indie game that I really look forward to, the kind of game that made this show happen, the kind of game that this show was made for. And now that I've got that game completed and podcasted about, I am going to play Citizen Sleeper next. It's a game that I'm very excited about. It's by Gareth Damian Martin, the creator of In Other Waters. It's on Game Pass. And usually at this point in the show, I don't say with any confidence what I will be reviewing next week, because it's always subject to change based on what I decide to play. But I think I'm literally going to start that one tonight. And so maybe, fingers crossed, maybe I've actually called what the next show will be about. And there might be an episode about Citizen Sleeper this time next week. I am also playing Nier Replicant. I'm also still playing Bayonetta. I'm sure I'll be talking more about those games in the future. But if you would like to come and talk to me in the meantime, you can find me on social media. I'm on Twitter as Gaming in the Wild. I'm on Twitch, and I have actually been streaming for once. There's also a YouTube channel, Facebook and Instagram. I do really, really appreciate anyone that leaves a star rating on Spotify for the podcast, or a written review and a star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you would like to support the podcast fully, you can also join the Patreon. It's patreon.com/gaminginthewild, just $1 a month or €1 a month. And you can join that Discord community and come and talk to me and all of the other fun listeners of the show who support it every week. Thanks very much for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other, and bye-bye for now.